bow tie funnel is a system of measurement that I use right at the start before I do any RevOps deployment for any business whatsoever. What it is it helps you have a like-for-like system of measurement across your entire revenue generation estate so that you can understand when a potential customer is one thing and when they are considered the next thing. What this in effect does is it helps you understand how you take a business from knowing absolutely nothing about your goods and services all the way through to being your company's biggest advocate. The reason why that's important is firstly because you're going to speak to those people in different ways. You're going to be, when you're looking for people to come and sit with you on a panel, just like I'm doing here with Shemek today, you're not going to be asking brand new leads to come and sit on a panel with you. Actually, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be going after your brand ambassadors, what we call your evangelists, because they're going to present the most robust and positive view of your company. That then turns into, as we all know, a demand gen funnel in itself, probably the most valuable demand gen channel, because referrals are the places where you're going to get the best, most trusted business from. What it also does is it enables you to see where the weak points, choke points, and points of velocity are within your sales process. You might be able to generate leads really, really well. You might be able to turn them into MQLs at a lightning pace. But when you get to a part of your sales process where you're trying to sell to them, you might fall flat. You might have a massive bottleneck there. You might see that when you break that down a level, that actually there's certain campaigns or certain salespeople that are really, really good at clearing that bottleneck. And you want to then take their process, interrogate that on a qualitative basis to try and inform on what everyone else is doing. Maybe there's something that everyone else is missing. Setting up your CRM environment in whichever way you use it, like this, gives you a really, really good chance of doing that at speed and getting time to value that much quicker. You can run revenue operations in anything, right? You can run it in Excel spreadsheets, you can run it in Salesforce, you can run it in Marketo, you can run it in pretty much anything you want. Today, we're talking about how you do it in HubSpot. And the reason why I like doing this stuff in HubSpot is because I believe that that is the tool that you get the quickest time to value when you set it up from. But ultimately, the thing that is most important is the robust methodology and strategy that you have in place right at the very start, which you then use as the skeleton to hang everything else off of. And today, what we're going to be talking about is how to structure your reporting in a way that means that you can get insight for your senior leaders quicker and trust on it being more accurate. Good sum up, Shemek?
Yeah, awesome, Mitch. Thank you very much for rushing that a bit. So guys, I mean, I'm just going to give you a glimpse that the story also came because Mitch was, have a huge experience working in different kind of marketing sales teams in the past, now revenue operations. And there was this issue from investors that how can we track a business performance of our portfolio of 20 companies, right? And standardized and trustworthy process was essential to understand if the business shape is, if the business is doing well or not. So this is something, you're probably being oftentimes asked about from the management of yours, right? Like what are your goals? What's your, what you're at currently in regards to your goals, and if you're going to hit your quotas or you are not. So essentially, this really allows you to be able to do that. And okay, let's go just into the practice because we've spent some time already.
Cool. So what I'm going to show you guys today is a couple of systems of delivery that exist within HubSpot right now to enable this. There's a couple of people on the call actually that I've done this for in various stages of my life. So you might see some things that you're familiar with. Obviously, I've redacted any identifiable information. It's all dummy data. But some of the systems and processes that I've used will be very familiar to some of the people on this webinar that I've worked with before. Cool. So there's a couple of systems of delivery that allow you to do this in HubSpot. Typically, where you're going to start off to get to time to value quicker is with a sales pipeline. And that's what I'm going to show you guys next. What this is, guys, is this is a diagram of how you design a sales pipeline. This one includes an SDR or a business development, a sales development function within it. What we do is, before we build anything in HubSpot, we design it in a tool like Lucidchart. And the reason why you design before you build is exactly the same reason why you don't go and build a house without blueprints that you get from an architect, because you're going to run into all sorts of trouble. So always use a tool like Visio or Lucidchart. Other tools are available. I like Lucidchart because it's cheap and it's easy. But here we go, and this is what we do. What we want to create is a loose enough framework to allow your salespeople to thrive and to work in the way that they best feel is appropriate, but it's tight enough to help us understand which direction the wind is blowing. And so we come up with milestones throughout the sales process, and we map them to this document here. So right at the very start, new prospect. And I always say that a new prospect is an MQL because we've got a couple of things here. If an MQL has come through marketing, and we're calling that, that's your inbound marketing, typically what I'll do is I will automatically create a deal record at that new prospect stage to hand it over to my SDRs to make it easier for them to manage it. That comes in there, it's an MQL. The reason why that works with outbound, so we do a lot of outbound, I've always done outbound in teams along with inbound marketing, I'm sure many of you are the same, is that based on our ICP and based on our SDRs doing prospecting of their own back, that can also be true. They can create an MQL, and as they're with their marketing hat on, they can say that I'm qualifying this lead as a marketing qualified lead because it meets our ICP. They're in a locale that we can operate in. Their job title works for who we want to try and sell to, and a bunch of other things that I'm going to share with you guys in a little bit about lead scoring. And you can dump them in there as an MQL too. What they're then going to do is then going to do their development and outreach there. Once the outreach starts, once they understand that they've accepted that MQL, either from marketing or they've agreed with their own assertion that they're going to market outbound leads that they've generated, that then gets converted to SQL when we move it into this initial outreach started stage. And then what you see here in yellow is the criteria that we are setting for that stage 2. And in blue is the required data properties, the required fields that need to be filled out in order for us to move that record into the next stage. And so on and so forth. And that moves through, and it's a single deal record that moves through here until we get to discovery stage. Once we get a lead to discovery stage, that's when my SDR team are handing it over to sales. Their job's done. They've gotten the lead in, they've booked the call, they've identified that there's demand there. Now it's over to the salesperson to spec out the solution. That's the end of the SDR pipeline.
And Mitch, what's your take on, because you can do outbound multiple ways. Also, there are a lot of practices where you basically do outbound, especially let's assume in HubSpot, on a contact level. So you don't open any kind of a deal, any kind of a pipeline. You just, let's say, use lead statuses, meaning that all the MQLs that are being, let's say, assigned are the ones that the reps should be working on. And then as soon as they start working on that, it automatically changes into, for example, it could change into an SQL, or it can still be MQL and then change into SQL when the meeting is booked. But they generally work on contacts level, not on a pipeline level with deals, right? Because you simplify, but you also use an object, which is a deal that is not exactly probably the object you would consider to a prospect, right?
Yeah, that's very astute, Shemek. Yeah, often that is how they do it, and you use that lead status toggle to do it. What I found in the businesses that I've worked for is that actually, when it comes to the reporting and the synergy between the sales pipeline, whenever I build things like this, they just seem to be able to get a better level of insight based on what they think they need to see as a business moving forward. Yeah, we say in England that there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Exactly.
This is one of the ways to skin a cat. This is the way that that I've felt works best.
We also see this oftentimes because it's simpler, right? Like, I mean, it's a visual, and the visual perspective of a pipeline is also easier to grasp rather than just contacts, right? Where you have a lot of contact. But that's probably just to see that those are two different points of view some people take.
Yeah, you got it. And so you move through each of these stages. Like Shemek said, we'll share a little bit of a detailed breakdown for you guys at the end. And then you move into your customer lifecycle stage here when you're integrating a customer. One of the things that I've started doing now is doglegging out of here and introducing a service ticketing pipeline to help manage the onboarding of a customer. And when that pipeline reaches its conclusion, it will then move the deal record associated with that deal into integration started and live and transacting. So that's another layer of things that we could talk about at a later date to help you guys engineer. And then the final thing that I just wanted to draw your attention to here, guys, is just the zonal KPIs. So I detail out the KPIs that I think the senior leadership team are going to want to see in each of these zones. And I use these as the bases for building my reports. That's the theory behind it. That's part of how you execute your pipeline bit in HubSpot. But there's a big bit that comes before that. And that's the marketing bit, which is around lead scoring and things like that. And that lead scoring model, which completely underpins your inbound activities. It's the benchmark for how you consider marketing activity to be good or not. And actually, there's a gentleman on the call, a guy called Julian, who's in the webinar that I've seen today, who I worked on something very, very much like this with to help him make sense of his lead scoring setup at a previous company that we were working at. What we do here is we look at different zones of influence. So if we want to look at hot leads, they're the people that are going to have the highest SLA. Hey, Julian, how's it going, man? If you look at our hot leads, these are the people that you're going to have your highest, most urgent SLA with. You want to get these people to sales pretty much immediately. You want a 24-hour SLA on them. How you identify them within the lead scoring model is they've told us that they want to talk to sales. They completed the contact us form. They told us what they want to talk to sales about. Within HubSpot, what I typically do is create an additional qualification level, which is an MQL grading system. So you set up an additional property, which is a drop-down select where you can select MQL grade A, MQL grade B, or MQL grade C. And what you can do there, and the purpose of doing that is that if someone fills out a contact us form or a demo form or something like that, we want sales to know that they're high grade. We want sales to know that they're the people that are signposting. So we stick an A grade on that. We then use that to drive some automation so that we can manage our SLA workflow. If the salesperson doesn't pick it up within 24 hours, revenue ops needs to know. Revenue ops then needs to tell the salesperson to accept it. And if they don't, we're taking that lead off of them and we're giving it to another salesperson, or we're sending it back to marketing, disqualifying that lead as sales did not meet SLA. And that comes into our marketing quality report. If we're in a situation where senior leadership is saying, well, none of our marketing leads are converting, we can take that to them and say, well, that's because the salespeople are missing their SLA 40% of the time. And we've got the data to back it up.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
That's also, when a lot of people say that MQLs are not created equal and they don't know which one to prioritize, the grading is really, cool stuff to help with that.
Yeah, you got it. And so then we look at our B grade MQLs, and typically our B grade MQLs are people that meet our ICP because they've told us that they're in the right demographical setup, they've got the right job title, they're in the right business vertical, all those sorts of things. But they haven't submitted a form. They've showed us intent because they've been looking at our website, things like that. They've been downloading content, they've been consuming things, coming onto webinars, but they haven't hand raised. We still think that they're worth someone talking to. So we'll flag those as a B grade MQL. We might not send them through to sales. We might send them through to the SDR function or something like that. But they're still going to a human being to chat to. And then you've got your C grade MQLs, who are people that are showing intent, but actually we don't feel that we can sell to them. We either keep them in marketing and just keep them on newsletters or things like that, or we send them to SDRs to try and see if there's someone else within that organization, if it's relevant, that we can influence and sell to that way. What we also have is negative weighting. So we want to take points off of people if we can't sell to them for whatever reason. They might be a journalist, they might be a student, they might be a competitor. There may be a number of different reasons why we actually don't want to send them into sales, because the main object of this exercise is maximizing the time that sales have with people who are more likely to buy. That's the goal of this. That this is what this lead scoring model does essentially. And then what I do is I do some scenario testing in the middle where I run through a hypothetical journey like this, and I just calculate whether or not my points make sense to meet my thresholds. On the previous diagram that we looked at, we were saying that threshold is for a subscriber, you could have that as like 30 points. For a lead is 30 to 99. If someone gets 100 points, they're an MQL. And we just test that hypothesis here. And then we build this with the lead scoring setup that exists within HubSpot. And we build a workflow that manages the handing over of those leads. And that's probably something for another session, something that we can talk about at a later date.
Exactly.
But
maybe just you can tell one word, because that's also interesting for me. How do you tackle this, recent also trends that we believe that all of these MQLs are more likely to become our customers, but the reality is maybe they are just downloading our webinars and have no, intent to buy at all. So do you have some additional processes to make sure that you actually reach out to the prospects that really show an intent signals, like I know first-party intent signals, or maybe you just use pricing pages, because then you can flood sales with a lot of MQLs that never converts, right?
Yeah, and that's why you have the B grade and the C grade classifications there for people who don't hand raise. You're not sending them to sales immediately. You're sending them to SDRs to try and develop, to see if that you can get a buzz going there. In terms of how we then identify behaviors that would suggest that people are doing that and they're just tire kickers, for example. Typically what I've been doing recently is just using my SDR team to research that and understand if we've got something going on. Because we've got resource there, right? I know a lot of businesses don't. You're never going to get it perfect. Sometimes you're going to send through bad leads. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to read people's minds.
Exactly. Sometimes salespeople do bad deals too, though, right? So no one's perfect. How do you apply this to buying center, i.e. decision makers, influencers versus users? Cool, that's a great question. So typically there is some other function within HubSpot called buyer role that I embed into the contact record. And I teach our SDR team who are doing the research on this, when they have those conversations and they start to do their stakeholder mapping, to always make sure they're selecting a buyer role for the leads that are coming through to them. And that way we start to paint a picture of who's on the buying committee, where the stakeholder maps reside. We could probably do a whole other webinar on target accounts and that functionality within HubSpot. But that's how I would start to do that, is by using that buyer role functionality within the contact record when you're handing your leads over to your sales community.
I would just add that nowadays, you can do a lot of artificial intelligence, so you can map out the titles, automatically match it to buyer personas, and match buyer personas with your buying roles automatically, and then just use manual recheck. That's also what you can do currently, especially thanks to ChatGPT.
Oh, that's pretty cool, actually. I didn't know that. We might have a little chat about that offline, because that sounds like something that will help me out solve a problem that I've got right now. Cool. Okay, so you've built your lead scoring model and you understand how marketing is working. You've built your pipeline. You've aligned your criteria with everyone within your revenue generating organization, and everyone is aligned and everyone knows when something is considered one thing and when something is considered the next thing. You're now able to go away and build your reporting based on those KPI zones. And I'm just going to show you guys how I do it in terms of a typical dashboard layout. So I've made this one with a little bit of dummy data for you. Firstly,
I think that it's, sorry for interrupting, but it's interesting, right? That now we've been discussing so much around strategy, the KPIs alignment, and the KPIs coming from actually processes, your go-to-market motions. So the reality is that the reporting and now what you see, the dashboards, is just the final outcome of all the stuff of all your clarity around your business. Because if you don't have a clarity what actually metrics are most important for you and move the needle, then those dashboards will be completely useless and you will just waste time on this. So that's, I think, an interesting also.
Exactly that. So pipeline review, your CRO is doing this once a week with your sales community. What the CRO is really interested in is just 4 questions. What are you selling? Who are you selling it to? How much is it worth? And when is it coming in? This pipeline review dashboard is designed specifically to answer those 4 questions and nothing else. So what we have, first off, is our scores on the doors. How are we performing right now? And usually I set this to the biggest period, which is the year. What is our goal? And I always just put goals in. Let me go back. I always put the goals in here right at the top, just so that everyone's clear on the revenue goals for the year. And I put those in there as to where we're at right now. If we then look at how that translates into things that we've sold, again, we put that in there and we do the quantities of those different things that are in there. Then we look at our win rates and we've got those there. And then we look at any other kind of like inbound. So I have here like deals that will come from our SDR team, how many of those we've won. What we're then looking at is...
I can maybe also, I mean, I've been recently interacting you a lot, but I think that's also useful for the audience, that what we recently also started to do with our main clients, and I can also see from others, is that when you build those plans, right, you had these goals like revenue goals, you had these deals closed, the win rates. That was also awesome that you showed that you have a benchmark based on which you plan your assumptions and goals. And it's also interesting to say, what are those 3-4 critical numbers that we need to monitor really closely? Because if they are, I mean, if, for example, we are decreasing in win rates, or maybe we are getting too less into the pipeline, or maybe there are few major factors or average deal size that will influence the end result, we should be paying attention to that really closely, because those are the biggest risk factors in our achieving our revenue plan.
Yeah, exactly that. So then we're going to talk about, you know, what we've bought, what we've sold so far, what each person's pipeline adequacy looks like against their goals. And again, we could probably do another session on how you build goal reporting in HubSpot too, because you kind of need to do that as well. So this is a weighted pipeline, and you can see what people's quotas are against what's in their pipeline and how much coverage they have, what you've booked so far in the year, and what you've got split by deal stage in your next bit. Now, this is quite an important graph, because if you know how long your sales cycle is, if you, let's say you've got like a 4-month sales cycle from the first stage in your pipeline, so from opportunity qualified, if you've got stuff in your pipeline that's opportunity qualified closing in the next month, you know it's never going to happen. You know it's rubbish. And you can see that in a report like this, and you can say to the salesperson, okay, you're telling me you're going to close this deal this month, but you're still at stage 1 of the pipeline. Unless you can justify to me very, very clearly why that's in there, you're moving that out. I don't want it in the forecast, because I don't think you're going to do it based on what we know about how long it takes to do deals like that. And you can just use that as a basis to have a conversation with your sales community and keep them honest. It's great that salespeople are, you know, positive, like win-orientated people. As a side effect of that, sometimes you get a little bit of unrealistic expectations in from them, and it's just important to temper that with what we know about the data sometimes. I call this next one my comic book, because what this tells me is how much we've got in our pipeline at the start of the period. This is set for a quarter. I can see how many deals have been brought forward, how many do we think we're going to close quicker than normal, what value has been increased, what value has been decreased, what's been pushed out, so what has rolled for a month. And then I can see what's lost, and I can see what's won, and I can see what we're exiting the quarter on pipeline value-wise. On the stuff that's pushed, you can click on that and interrogate that. And if you have things that are repeatedly rolling, you can then go to your sales team and say, hey, look, guys, this just keeps rolling. I want it out of the forecast unless you can explain to me why. So it just gives you the ammunition to come to your sales team and hold them to account for the information that they're putting into their forecast, which if it doesn't match what we know our win rate, average order value, and length of sales cycle is. And then you've got your pipeline adequacy, and this is probably my favorite report. So pipeline adequacy essentially tells you the difference between what your sales quota is, what your target is, what the size of your pipeline would allow you to achieve if you closed 100% of everything that's in your pipeline. And then it gives you a weighting, what you're likely to close based on the current maturity of each of those opportunities. And when I say maturity of opportunity, if you've got a deal that's at like proposal stage or whatever, you only really want to factor 50% of that revenue, because you're only winning 50% of your proposals. And actually you can get closer to that data with a report that I'm going to show you in a little bit of time, and you can use that to then weight your pipeline accordingly. I split that into 3 scenarios. I give a pipeline adequacy excluding our outliers. So our outliers are anything that is in the pipeline but has got a forecast category of not forecast. That just gives you your God's honest answer. So you've got where we think we're going to get to if we close everything and what our current maturity suggests. I then do a vision which includes all of our upside. So I put all of our stuff that's in the pipeline but has a forecast category of not forecast in on top to tell you what our gap between our upside is and what our realistic expectation is. We then do work on that to decide whether it's real upside and we've got a chance of bringing it in, or if it's smoking dope upside and needs to be out of the forecast completely because it's not a real opportunity. Am I allowed to say smoking dope, Shemek? Sorry, I don't have another way of phrasing that, I'm afraid. But
no, that's really good. And you know what? I had recently a question in the community exactly around it, and I suggested your way of doing that as well, because when there are high deal values, I mean, they are stuck in the pipeline for quite a long time because sales representative doesn't want to let it go, and actually. Yeah, giving it as excluding it as an outliner within the forecast, if someone is holding the deal too long, was really interesting insight. I understood from recent discussion we had.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I just do a view that has just got the total upside in it if we just wanted to have a look at what's hanging around there. And this is the formula that I work with every single business that I've ever worked with on, is building out their reports based exactly on this kind of structure. Just wanted to shout out a guy called John Sheard, who I used to work under at a Polish business named Impost, who introduced me to this idea and has helped me introduce it into my skill set. Pipeline velocity. How are we doing for time? We're pretty much bang on, aren't we?
We still have a few minutes. People are hanging. I mean, people are still here, and
listening. Cool. That's great. I'll
continue. So we don't need to worry.
All right. Cool. So pipeline velocity, the rate at which things move through your pipeline, and this is really, really crucial to understand what your win rate's going to be and how long it takes to close things. With this information, this is the ammunition you're going back to your sales community and you're saying, okay, you've got a deal that's closing this month that you haven't sent a proposal out for. We know that typically once we've sent a proposal to a client, it takes us a month to close the deal. Why are you so convinced that even with us knowing that, you think that deal is still going to close this month? And if they cannot coherently answer the 4 questions aligned with that, which are, what are we selling? Who are we selling it to? How much is it worth? And when's it coming in? And also why? It's out. We're removing it from the forecast. And the earlier on in the period that we can have those conversations and understand those things, the more accurate and happy your senior leadership team are going to be with you based on your outputs of your forecasts and your reporting. So the way that
that's, I mean, when I look, at all of these reports, I mean, those are just reports, but I think what also makes a big difference is you who have the experience, ability, and credibility to act as a partner to all the other go-to-market leaders, and also challenge what they are showing to you, or what challenge what you see in the data, right? I challenge them by seeing what's in the data. And that's something that I think makes a difference in the RevOps role, right? Because not everyone are perceived as a strategic and leadership, position, but as an operational that just should provide the data, but not actually be, have a place in the table to challenge the data, right? That's I think what makes the difference, especially,
You got it, exactly that. So this is sort of untraditional pipeline velocity, because I know when a lot of people think about pipeline velocity, they just want to know dates to close. Actually, there's a little bit more to the story than that. The way that I consider pipeline velocity is how many deal stage movements an opportunity has within a period, and how many opportunities are moving through those stages within a period. To me, that's true velocity. Not how many days it takes to close something. It's about how quickly something moves through stages. So what we do here is we compare this period to last period, and we look at last period. Okay, so we created 44 opportunities, including what was already in our pipeline, 60 opportunities moved into opportunity qualified, and so on and so forth. How many moved through and how many closed lost? If your closed lost number at the bottom is lower than this number at the top, is more than this number at the top for the quarter, you've got a problem, because you've got pipeline contraction, and that's a serious problem. That means that you're not doing enough on your demand gen to feed your sales community, and that's a bad problem to be in. That's something that will require immediate attention to fix. If you're creating
what you're saying is essentially that you should be tracking the comparison between closed loss to all created, and if you have less all created than or no, it's actually closed lost. So
if you have more closed losts than you have created, you have pipeline contraction, and that's a serious problem. If you're creating more than you're losing, that's where you want to be. But you can't be in a situation.
I would look at a different way. I should be closing. I should be closing. I should be opening more than I'm closing, because then if I'm closing, let's say 20 this period, and I just open 10, I might slow down with my growth. So that was where my head was wrapping around.
I would agree with winning, certainly. But if you're losing things out of the pipeline and you're not replacing them like with new opportunities, that's a big problem. And you need to invest in your demand gen to sort that out for you. Sometimes the answer that is given by senior leadership is, "Oh, just hire more salespeople," but actually oftentimes that creates a problem, because it just adds more mouths to feed if they're not proactive and they're not doing a high degree of outbound. So we look at those, when you get to the end of the quarter, you can compare those and see where you're at. If you've got 2 quarters whereby you're creating more than you're closed losting, then that's good. If you've got 2 quarters where you're closed losting more than you're creating, that's a serious problem. That's the dictionary definition of a recession, if we're talking about it from global economics, right? 2 consecutive quarters of contraction. It's no different here when you're looking at your pipeline velocity. Win rate. Win rate is again your other really important metric, and this is where you understand where the bottlenecks are in your sales process. This number here, your cumulative conversion, is your overall win rate. These next step conversions are how good you are at getting one thing from next stage to the other. So you're typically always going to see bottlenecks at the top, because that's lower qualified opportunities, and lots of those are going to be closed out. If you're seeing bottlenecks further down here, where if you're getting to commercials agreed and sent, and you've got a big bottleneck here between getting the deal signed, you've got a big problem within your sales community, because you haven't got people that can close deals for you. But there are things that you can do at every stage here to clear bottlenecks. If you've got a problem here where you're getting loads of proposals out to clients, but you can't get a commercial agreement, you might have some problems on pricing. You might have some problems on selling value. If you're up at the top here and you're getting lots qualified, but you're not completing discoveries, it might be that actually you need to look at your qualification criteria. Are you speaking to the right people? Are you getting the right people in the room?
And from your experience, what are the biggest bottlenecks you usually notice across the pipeline velocity and win rates?
I mean, this is dummy data, and it's fairly typical, to be honest with you. I would expect to see a big bottleneck at the top, where you're just trying to make sure that your qualified opportunities are actually qualified. And then when you're trying to get a customer to pony up to give you a bit of money, you're always going to get a little bit of a bottleneck there when you're trying to negotiate with them on how much they're going to pay you. So that's fairly typical. I'd expect to see bottlenecks in both those places.
Okay. And because this is are we going to get to a leaderboard? Because then I think the biggest trouble comes in, right? When you start comparing each representatives.
Exactly. Yeah. So then you see your team activities and what each of these people are doing. This is good, because it helps. You put this up where everyone can see it, and it keeps salespeople on their toes a little bit. You see who's working the hardest. If you're then translating that into output, which you will see typically on a salesperson's pipeline value, then you're great. If you come in here and you see that poor old Swanson down here isn't really doing anything, they're not really doing any activity, I bet you if I go and look at their pipeline's going to be lousy too. And then I know that I can have a conversation and say, look, just a thought, can you tell me why your pipeline's not good? And they'll be like, well, I'm doing all the right things, all the stories that they tell you. You can come here and say, well, it's interesting, because I'm looking at your activity output and it's low. I think that's why your pipeline is not where it needs to be. It's because based on what I'm seeing right here, you're not actually doing very much. Is that fair? Is usually the argument that would be put forward in that situation. And then usually the hardest working people, the people that are taking the most shots, they're the people with the most buoyant pipelines. I think everyone who works in what we do would say that there is a huge positive correlation in that regard.
More input, more output.
That's it. but the right kinds of input as well, right?
Correct.
Close loss analysis, so final one. So what you got here is at what stage you're losing opportunities, and this is fairly typical. You're always going to lose the most right at the top, because that's the stuff where you're like, now I'm disqualifying that because it doesn't meet our requirements or whatever. It's if you're disqualifying if you're losing lots of stuff when you get down to the bottom end of your funnel, that's when you've got problems and things that you need to interrogate. To me, this is fairly typical. Close loss reasons, yeah, look, they tell you a bit, like they tell you if you're losing on price, they tell you if you're losing because your solution's not quite right. They're things that you can then input into product-led growth. If you are selling something and you're losing out because you don't offer a specific thing that your competitors do, you can engineer that in a way to give you the data to back that up, to come to your product teams, to ask them to start developing solutions like that. New revenue, I put in the bottom there. It's not related to closed loss. It's just there so that you can see like what new revenue you're accumulating from year to year and how you split that revenue out. And yeah, that's pretty much for me, guys. We're there. I whistled through. We're about 10 minutes over, so apologies for that, and apologies for the technical problems at the beginning.
No, I hope we were still entertaining and people just stayed with us. So people feel free to ask questions right now. We might stay a few minutes more. I also leave a link to Mitch LinkedIn's profile, because I expect you might have a lot of questions sometimes that Mitch could solve some kind of your problems. And
so just on that, Shemek, sorry, like the business that I work for, Livingston, we help the biggest business in the world solve problems with enterprise software. We help them understand the relationship between what they've bought, what they've deployed, and what their workforce is using. We help them optimize their estate, avoid risk from software audits and things like that, and manage costs. So what I do from a RevOps perspective, it's sort of, there is synergies between what the company I work for do as well for some of the biggest business in the world. So if you've got issues with your software estate, get in touch and I can link you up with some smart people to help you solve those problems.
Sure. I mean, I've seen so many companies losing hundreds of thousands of dollars just because of software that no one uses. Is this something also you look at?
That's pretty much exactly it. We look at what you're using. We help you renegotiate your contracts, help you understand how to optimize your software estate and manage it like a real portfolio, because they are investments.
Yeah, correct.
And it's important to do so and take it seriously.
Awesome. So guys, I encourage you to get in touch with Mitch whenever, if it comes to enterprise software or if it comes to revenue operations. It was awesome to have you here, and thank you, Mitch, as well for doing that. It was awesome, and I hope maybe we can do one day a repeat without any kind of early obstacles. And it was really great to have you.
Great, lovely to be here. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.